So some may wonder why I chose the prodigal son to preach on Easter Sunday. So I have a little explanation. First of all, we have been using the parables all during Lent. So why not use it on Easter too? And this particular parable, many theologians call the gospel within the gospel. It's the center of Jesus' message. So what a great thing to have on Easter Sunday. And then lastly, the repetition of the Father in the story is that my son who is dead is alive again. Kent Nerburn, in his little book, Small Graces, tells the story of Nikki, a friend of his. She had cerebral palsy, and to all the world she looked like one of God's cruel jokes. She could not walk unaided. Her legs were useless sticks, her arms helpless bird wings. When she talked, her head lolled and spittle dripped down her chin. Her voice was a grating and unintelligible bray. He loved to talk to her, not out of some twisted notion of self-congratulation, but because Nikki was so full of life. She had a mischievous twinkle in her eye and a reservoir of joy that was deeper than anything he could imagine. But more than once, he had seen parents in supermarkets turn their children away when they saw her coming. She was a reminder of their darkest fears about life gone wrong, careening out of control. She was to them a living symbol of death. How could she really live in her condition, they thought. Her own heart, though, was filled with life and dreams. Nikki spent her days in a sheltered workshop with other physically challenged people, putting spatulas into plastic bags with her toes. But at night, she wrote, holding a notebook with one foot and a pencil between the toes of the other, creating poems and stories of birds lifting off their perch and taking flight. And she wrote of love. She wrote poems to a non-existent and unknown lover. She told Kent, "Someday I am going to get married." And Kent smiled and nodded. But like the parents in the supermarket, he averted his eyes. The prodigal son is a story of two sons who avert their eyes from their darkest fears and a father who does not. The younger son, like many second-born siblings, graded in the glory shining from the firstborn. Like many firstborn, the older son feels both the adoration and anxiety of his parents and unconsciously takes on the responsibility of attending to their feelings rather than his own. If he quells their anxiety by working hard and succeeding in doing their bidding, then he can bask in their adoration. Nice to know there's dysfunction in ancient families as well, huh? The younger son, however, can't compete with this, so it is no surprise that he would want to run away. He believes he is as good as dead if he stays, so he averts his eyes from a future in this graveyard and dreams of unfettered freedom. What is surprising is that he asks his dad for his inheritance before he leaves. He forgets a small detail. You don't get an inheritance until a person actually dies. So to ask for it in that society is to ask your dad to drop dead. The second surprise is that the dad agrees to do so. I mean, if a son says, "Drop dead, Dad, and give me my money," I'd imagine the father would say, drop that attitude, son, or no money for you. You're out of the will. But the father in the story just gives in. Some would say he is shirking his hierarchical authority, and as a father, he's good as dead. So the younger son takes the money and runs, goes off to a far country to find life, unrestricted freedom from all the responsibilities and relationships of home, and then, you guessed it, proceeds to lose every last penny. And he finds himself feeding pigs for a job, which, for Jesus' original audience, is worse than it looks to us, for pigs are not kosher animals, and to have any contact with them is to be unclean and unacceptable to God and to God's people. Finally, the text says, the son comes to himself. That is, he is no longer averting his eyes. He's looking at the real truth of his life. He realizes that unfettered freedom is a living death. And he cooks up a little deal, not unlike the inheritance deal. He rehearses a speech to deliver to his dad when he gets home. I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be your son. Treat me like one of the hired hands. You can kind of see him walking home, kind of going over the words and the gestures in his mind. But as he gets close to home, there's another surprise. His father runs out to meet him, and he starts hugging him and kissing him. And when the son says, I have sinned against heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy to be your son, his dad cuts him off. He can't finish his speech. Get the best robe, put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet, kill the fatted calf. That's great. Kill the fatted calf. Leave the cats alone. Kill the... We'll just rewrite scripture for a moment. Should be fine. Oh, my goodness. Kill the fatted calf. We're going to have a party. For the son of mine was dead, but now he's alive again. You see, the father has never thought that he wasn't his son. And he has no petty comments. I mean, I can imagine, one of my kids coming home like this, and I would want to at least get out something like, do you have any idea of the pain that you have caused me? Okay, I'll take you back, but from now on things have to be different. There's none of that. There's only joy, for his son was dead, and now he's alive. Oh. But the older son, upon hearing of the party for his brother, refuses to go in and celebrate. Again, the father surprises us. He comes out to meet the older son where he is. And the older son complains. I've worked like a slave for you, he said, and I've never disobeyed your command. And yet, you've never even killed a little goat for me so that I could have a party with my friends. But your son, who has lost all your money and been consorting with prostitutes, you throw him a party. But if you look at it closely, what you see is that there's no way the older son could possibly know what the younger son was doing when he was gone and losing the money. The whole prostitute thing is a projection of his own fantasy in his own mind. And the father says, son, you are always with me. All that I have is yours. You see, the older son had been averting his eyes from another kind of death. He feared the disapproval or the disappointment of his father. And while the younger son thought that he had to trick his dad into receiving him back home, the older son had been tricking his dad all along. He didn't tell him what he deeply wanted and needed. He didn't ask his father for a party with his friends because he feared his father wouldn't grant it. Neither did he know how deeply his father loved him. And so he averted his eyes from what he thought was a living death, not by seeking unfettered freedom, but by a false union with his father. Well, we humans are complex beings. We make up things in our heads that we think will bring us real life, when real life is already staring us in the face. We dream of more money, different families, a better boss, a better body, different talents, an inheritance that will finally come, and someday I'm going to hit it and make it big. But in so doing, we consign ourselves to a living death, a false union with God and others, or unfettered freedom from them. This story calls us to trust that in this moment, not averting our eyes, but just as we are and just as the world is, we are loved, we are accepted, we belong, and no manner of struggle, disaster, or disease can take real life from us. Not just survival, not just getting by, but real life, filling up and spilling over. Kent Nerburn lost touch with Nikki for a few years. Then, by chance, he saw her on the street in front of a store, sitting in her wheelchair. "Kent!" she called in her clumsy and halting voice. She was flapping her arms in excitement, and she jammed her hand toward him as he approached. "Look!" And he stared at her useless paw. On her ring finger was a gold band with a small diamond. "See?" she said, twisting her jaw and lolling her head. "I told you!" She had met him at the workshop. He had seen in Nikki what Kent had seen in her. They had courted for several months, and he, himself misshapen, had not been afraid of the limitations of her twisted and helpless body. She had not averted her eyes from her condition, and yet she was not embittered. She was not angry. She was not cursing God, and no one could have blamed her if she did, for the unfairness of her life was cause enough for bitterness and despair. But instead, she opened her heart in faith. She dreamt not of a changed body, not of the ability to walk. She was not the younger son dreaming of unshackled freedom. Neither did she withhold her deepest dreams from others, like the older son settling for a false sense of union. She kept her heart open to the dream of love. And through this, she found the hope to live joyfully and generously. When people ask me what the resurrection means, I'm never sure what people are looking for. I'm wondering if they want some kind of magical incantation that keeps them alive after death. I understand that hope. But when people ask me what the resurrection means, all that I can really do is point to a stance like Nikki's. She is one of the deepest meanings of Easter. Nerburn says this: "Make no mistake, the world is a dark and brutal place. Children starve for no reason. Madmen kill innocent people and run away laughing. But Nikki, whose body is a daily reminder of tragedy and suffering, kept her heart open to the dream of love. When the younger son wished him dead, the father kept his heart open to the dream of love. When the older son revealed his false union with his father, the father kept his heart open to the dream of love. When Jesus was met with rejection, suffering, and death by crucifixion, he kept his heart open to the dream of love. And friends, when you finally accept that life is not in your control, you are not lost, for you can keep your heart open to the dream of love. For love lives on beyond every hatred, beyond every tragedy, beyond every disease, beyond every rejection, and even death itself, giving joy, meaning, and hope to life. With the hand that held her engagement ring, the wheelchair-bound woman who wrote poems of birds in flight beckoned Kent closer. You know why birds fly? She asked, voice struggling, eyes a twinkle. No, he said, I don't. She shook her head several times as if gathering her thoughts before whispering so softly he could barely hear it. Because they're so damn bad at walking. And she burst out laughing. And she turned her wheelchair and she set off down the street like a bird taking wing. And she got to the corner and she turned and she held her hand up and the ring caught the light of the sun. And she yelled out, I told you so! And then she waved her hand and she was gone. You know why humans love life? Because we're so damn bad at controlling it. And on that first Easter Sunday, the disciples could almost hear Jesus saying, I told you so. Friends, open up your heart to the dream of love. Open up your heart to the dream of love.